Welcome to the Freedom Fridays Project podcast. I'm Pete Clark, your host, the Whispers Guy. It appears that work expands to the time that we give it, and I started to explore how I was investing my time and effort, particularly on Fridays. It's evolved to an exploration and experiment with time, energy, attention and identity, and a mindset shift from I have to I choose to. So if you're interested in exploring some changes to the way that you invest your time and your energy, if you'd like some tips on the way as you make some changes perhaps to your identity, if you would like the freedom of I choose to away from I have to, then this is the podcast for you. So welcome to the Freedom Fridays Project podcast. Welcome to this week's episode of the Freedom Fridays podcast, where I have I say this every week, a really special guest, but this guy really is, for me, a special guest because we've lived in the same country for many years, but we probably haven't met in that same country for many years. And my guest wouldn't even know that I've been following his journey over the last 12 to 18 months. And hence, that's why I'm delighted to have on my show today, David Riley. How are you, sir?
Good to see you smiling face across Zoom here, and I apologize if there's any background noise. I've pulled over to a side street here on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, and so if we get any background noise, then my apologies.
That's okay. We've done 18 months of Zoom, David. I think we've seen and heard it all. So, David, I start with the same question every week. This is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, people going through big changes. What's the big change that you've gone through over the last 12 to 18 months?
Look, I've dragged my wife and 3 kids on a caravan trip around Australia. We've done, a big lap over the last 12 months, starting out in southern Queensland. We're just finishing up over the next few weeks, and we've done a clockwise lap right around the coast of the continent of Australia. And so that's been, I guess, my big change, yeah.
Now, a little bit of a reveal. When we spoke earlier, David, you were a little bit unsure about whether that was extraordinary or not. And I'm gonna wager quite a large bet, not that I'm a gambling man, that anyone listening would go, OMG, that is extraordinary. How did you, why did you, when did you, how did that? I'm sure there are a dozen questions that are firing off in people's heads. So maybe I'll start with why? Why now?
Well, there's probably a few things that motivated us to do it now. It's been something that, I've been nagging my wife about for a few years now, and she fends me off with legitimate reasons why we wouldn't be able to do it right then. But I think the kind of the pressing thing that motivated us was we've got 3 kids, two are teenagers, one sort of late primary school, and the oldest is turning 14, turning 15, and there's only a window of opportunity when where your kids become a little bit too old to want to hang out in a tin can of a caravan with their parents for a prolonged period of time. And so that was one thing that kind of said, let's do it. Let's do it now. And I think the other thing, of course, too, was this once in a century pandemic that has reminded everybody that, look, you can plan, but plans can change really quickly. And you've got to really, just where possible, live in the moment. So I did say to Joanne, look, now, we had already had some plans underway, which was good. And when the pandemic broke, it was kind of like, well, is this a good time or a bad time? Look, it's just time. Let's do it. And so we started just before Christmas. last year. We're fortunate that we had an off-road caravan, which allowed us to go to places and see things that many people haven't. And we've just basically followed the sun. So the Southern Hemisphere summer, of course, starts around Christmas time. In fact, today's the first day of summer that we're recording on, first day of a Southern Hemisphere summer. And we just headed south. So we've basically followed the sun right around the coastline. We did spend a few weeks in the early autumn heading up through the guts of Australia, right through the centre. We went up from South Australia up through the Flinders Ranges, up the Unadilla Track, up to Uluru, which is that Ayers Rock, that massive monolith that many see as the heart of the continent. And so we did travel up there through the early autumn. It was hot. It was, early, like it was 41, 42, 43 degrees. Some of the locals said you're lucky it's cool. There's a southerly wind blowing. It's really cool this time of year for when you're coming. So you're fortunate to do it then. There were some occasions where my kids didn't want to get out of the car because of flies, blowflies that just jumped on you as soon as you. And we ate some meals with those black fly nets over our heads and sort of passing up food up through the middle. But it was still that was the only time we really left the coast from at a great distance. Although in places over in Western Australia, we did go inland a little bit to see things like the Karajini National Park and the Gibb River Road and places like that. So for the 12 months, we've just been doing a slow big lap right around the continent.
Wow. David, I'm sure people listening, and I've thought about it, I'm sure people would say things like, wow, I'd love to do that. But I reckon less than 1% actually do it.
Yeah, I guess there are obstacles for why people wouldn't be able to have this kind of adventure or any I guess, significant adventure. And those obstacles are real, and sometimes they're imagined. They're in our head. And what would the obstacles be? Pete, help me out here. I guess money might be a significant one for people. How do you finance that kind of adventure?
Was it expensive, or did you manage on a relatively simple budget?
Yes, and yes. So yes and no, and yes and yes. So look, for that kind of, I would say that it's probably would. Now we did things pretty simply. But if anyone was wanting to do something like this for 12 months, you're probably looking at about 35 to 40 grand. So you're looking at about $3,000 a month. Accommodation is quite cheap. Look, we did it, our accommodation was about $500 a month.
Wow.
Which, if you're prepared to free camp a little bit and your setup allows you to do that, you can do it really, really cheaply. Fuel is about $1,400 to $1,500 a month on a bad month. But I'd like to suggest that there are many people in Sydney spending that on fuel each month anyway, commuting back and forth from work. Food, again, maybe $1,200 a month. And so all up, it works out, 40 grand for the year, about $3,500 a month. Wow. So look, we rented out our house to do it. I had a little bit of long service leave and a bit of annual leave up our sleeve. And so I guess with any kind of change or any adventure, whether that be travel like we're experiencing, or maybe a new maybe getting involved in your own business or doing something else, I think if you can just do the maths and if the financial maths kind of work out a little bit, but there's a bit that you're unsure about, I just encourage, as we've discovered and discovering, if you just kind of take a step of faith and go out and do it, all of those minor details work themselves out, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. And the
Bit of
listeners
experience
might.
this, Pete, with. I interrupted you then, but I was going to say you would have experienced this with, with setting up your own business. You kind of pull out a napkin or an envelope or a notepad or something. You work out a few finances, and you say, "Look, it's there or thereabouts. I reckon we can do this."
Well, that's an interesting perspective there, because I'm not a numbers guy at all. I'm more faith driven in terms of I'm going to trust it's going to be okay. I didn't even work out if it was going to be kind of okay. I just assumed it would be. And I actually gave myself a timeline rather than a money line. I'm going to do this for 12 months, see what happens, as opposed to I need to earn 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, whatever it might be.
Then there you go. So if you can say, well, let's just give it a go for a year, and what's the worst that can happen, and be realistic about that, because some people catastrophize many things. And
yes,
but if you can say, what's realistically the worst that can happen? Can we come back from there if it's if it was the wrong thing to do? And if you can get your head around that, then yeah, these kinds of experiences that our family and others have had like that can go from wouldn't that be great to do something like that, to wasn't that great, we did it.
Yeah. You talked about taking a leap of faith. The listeners might not know that you're actually a man of the faith, and your role is, one of your many roles is a minister. Were you able to use those skills and background on the way around?
Look, in a yes. So you're right. I'm a ordained minister. In fact, when you and I used to work together, Peter, back 20 odd years ago, I ended up we stayed in contact, of course, over those years. But I ended up going and studying theology and becoming a minister. And so yes, so that wording I mentioned, a step of faith, is both kind of an expression, but also literal. And yes, so what I found, of course, was that in our travels, when you meet up with someone around a campfire in the middle of nowhere, people have time and also a headspace to talk about the deeper, more meaningful issues of life. And so, look, there were one or two occasions when they would say, "And so what do you do for a living?" And I'd tell them, and that was the end of the conversation. And often I'll even apologize. I'll say, "Look, is there anything I need to apologize for on behalf of, the last few thousand years of the church's existence?" And so, but look, by and large, people, I've had some wonderful conversations with people, and we've also been able to stay in a few church car parks too, which is a nice perk of the job, to have to save us some money. So yes, but look, there are we mentioned obstacles. Money's one, kids are another. Our kids. One's in a couple of years into high school, another one goes to high school next year, and there's a third one who's just happy to, I don't know, just be wherever. But yeah, I mean, one of the obstacles I imagined was, is this going to impact upon their schooling? But the opposite is true. It's accelerated their schooling. It's their education has been fantastic, and I'd encourage anyone thinking about doing something, whether here in Australia or in the States, or your listeners, over there in Europe, if they've got kids of a high school age, they're old enough to be, for these sorts of experiences, to have lifelong, have a lifelong impact upon them, where they're old enough to remember and young enough that they're not having to, I don't know, stop uni for a while. So it's been great for us. But then, of course, you've got the imagined obstacles to why you couldn't do it as well. And they are imagined. What if we get bogged? What if we get lost? How is this going to impact my career? what if we damage the car or whatever? And we've done all of that. We've got bogged, we've damaged the car, and all of that. But it just adds more stories
Yeah.
that we've shared as a family. In fact, did you read about a week or two ago that family that got bogged
Yes.
on the Unadata track? We were up the Unadata track. We were in that spot in March. Luckily enough, it didn't rain. And, these people had to get helicoptered out.
Wow.
And I saw some online comment, this is a mum and dad and two young kids. And they left their caravan there, and they'll go back after Christmas to try and retrieve it. And I saw some online comments saying, "Oh, that's my worst nightmare." I reckon that'd be fantastic. What a great story. No one died, and they've got a story that they'll tell for the rest of their life. So,
Yeah.
so all of those imagined obstacles of why you can't do it, they are imagined. And sometimes you kind of got to say, well, look, if there's been something in your heart that you wanted to do, and it won't go away, and this experience didn't go away. I tried to make it go away, but it wouldn't go away. I kept on bringing it up with my wife. And if your listeners have something on their heart that won't go away, just do it.
Great advice, sir. You may remember I've got an education background, and so I trained as a teacher. And I remember years ago, I can't remember who it was, but they defined education as everything that you remember after you've forgotten everything that you've learned. Meaning the school-based stuff is negligent, almost immaterial compared to life experiences. And you've just given your kids, a whole lifetime of experiences in 12 months.
Yes, and that is, Pete, that's I hope if I can get a little bit sort of, bit vulnerable here with you man. I knew that I would regret not doing it. If we laying on my deathbed in years to come, hopefully years to come, I know I would regret not doing something like this. But the other thing too is that, you're hoping that when you get into your dotage, and when you're hoping that you give your kids experiences that encourage in them a sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder, a sense of confidence that, well, if we can do that, then changing a job or changing a career, or asking that boy or girl out, or going traveling, or I can, if I've done that, then I can do this.
Yeah.
And it's hopefully, that when I've died, that my kids will remember me fondly for providing those kinds of experiences with them.
David, I think you've very simply but profoundly defined what I think education should be about in all its realms, as in curiosity, wonder, and confidence.
I didn't mean to steal your next book there, Pete, but there you go. There's the outline.
If I may, I'm going to continue the vulnerability point, because throughout lockdown for me, I feel very fortunate, and I'm humbled. And I think we've obviously created this, my wife and I, but we're still fortunate that we've got 3 great kids, and all 5 of us get on. And during lockdown, we weren't locked down in an off-road caravan, but some of the things we've done and chatted about and experienced and discussed, and I said to them the other night, and I'm welling up a little bit because I felt it, and I'm about to say it again. I found myself falling in love more and more with my family as every week passed. What was that like for you in a tin can?
Well, I guess there's a difference in that some people have experienced lockdown in parts of the world where they couldn't leave their flat. So I can understand, where cabin fever sets in, and tensions rise, and people think, well, that's just you square that or cube that in a caravan, and it's going to be far worse. But it's not the case. In fact, with a caravan, you're spending far more time outside.
Right.
And you really only, your caravan really is just there for sleeping. That was our experience anyway. We were going on walks and at the beach and, sitting outside of an evening around the campfire. And although I did have a number of times where, you're lying in bed, heading off to sleep, you're chatting with your kids or in the bunks down the other end of the caravan. And you have this realization, of course, that your greatest earthly wealth is within 5 or 6 meters of you. You've got your wife beside you, your partner, and you've got in my experience, my family has 3 kids down there chatting, and everything that matters in this life is there. And so the experience, as many have experienced through this once in a century pandemic, is a reminder of just the importance of the simpler things in life. The family that you've got there, Pete, in your house. Have you got enough food for the day? Yes. Have you got somewhere warm to sleep for tonight? Yes. Well, that's all you need, isn't it? That's all you need. This worrying about tomorrow and all those other concerns, they quickly fall by the wayside when you have these experiences like you've had and like many of your listeners would have had, just to remind you of what's important.
I'm making a big assumption that in since I've known you, and I'm guessing your journey since then, that you're a relatively introspective, reflective, you think about your thinking, you've done a lot of work on yourself. Over the last 12 months, what did you learn about yourself that was maybe a surprise to you?
The last 12 months. Look, I think it's I've been keeping a journal each day, as I have for the last 20 years. Now I say, look, a journal each day. It's only 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes each day where you just reflect on your experiences and what you're thinking about. I've encouraged actually my kids, who probably aren't old enough to keep a regular journal, but part of their schooling this year has been keeping a journal each day as well. And one of the things they kind of roll their eyes at me when I suggested each day is just to say, look, more than just writing about what you've done or what you've seen, write about how that made you feel. And it's my hope that as as I've learned and as you've done, Peter, because I know you do something similar, you start seeing commonalities crop up with your experience. And I think your question was, what have I learned about myself over the last 12 months? There's 2 things. One is that it's a reminder to me that we should regularly upend our lives. Every couple of years, or in my case, probably every 10 years, just do something that completely upends it, because it's a reminder that things are going to be okay. Things will be okay no matter what happens. And so the experience has reminded me that dramatic things can happen in your life, and yet you'll still not just survive but thrive. So look, I'm not sure whether that's I'll probably, when we hang up from this Zoom chat, Pete, I'll think of something more profound, but that's the answer that comes to mind for me at the moment.
And there was a second thing, or was that the second thing?
Yeah, there was a second thing, wasn't there? There was 2 things. I'm probably it's also been a reminder that there is some continued work I need to do on myself. I thought that I was immensely patient, But there have been some events, some occasions, some incidences where I have lost my cool with the kids, and lost my cool in a way that even shocked me. And so I've had to think about that and say what was going on during that time. It wasn't the kids that really set me off; they were just a trigger. There was something else going on. What was it? What fear? What concern? What was going on that had me lose my cool more than I should have, and more than I expected?
That's a very honest and vulnerable answer, sir. Thank you. And I note that you use the words reminder, despite me asking you about what did you learn about yourself. And what I observe in most of the insights that people have, whether it's 12 months around Australia in a tin can, whether it's a change of job or lifestyle or a change of country, is depending on what stage of life they're at, it's often a reminder. It's often, oh, I know that, but I needed to be reminded of that. And it's rarely something that comes as a surprise to them that they don't know. What the surprise is often is how often or how much they'd forgotten. And so it acts as a reminder as opposed to something brand new, which I think in itself tells us a little bit about our humanity and what we need to thrive and survive.
That's right. And so I mentioned journaling before, and doing a daily journal, and it's been a practice I've been doing for the better part, pretty much since my last year or two of high school, on and off, but certainly pretty much each day, or at least every second day for the last 25 years. And as well as a journaling process helping you to work through whatever you're going through at the moment, what I didn't expect with this practice was, and Pete, you've probably known this far earlier than me, and maybe many of your listeners will have as well. I'm late to this understanding, was that when you read through your old journals, and I tend to do this each day. I'll read through one from 20 years ago, one from 10 years ago, and one from a year ago. Through that practice, you are reminded of many lessons that you had but forgot about, and so that kind of little bit of autobiographical reminder of what you're capable of, what your weaknesses are, how you tend to respond in certain circumstances and situations. That having that reminder there on your bookshelf in the form of a journal, I've found a real blessing for my continued growth.
You said that it was in your heart, and you, over many years, were trying to convince your wife. I'm guessing maybe your kids were too young to even understand the possibility. Focusing on them for a second, what helped them thrive in Dad's adventure? And when did it become our adventure, not just Dad's adventure?
So look, Joanne, my wife, Joanne's preference is normal, regular routine, and a predictable rhythm to life. So I've got to really give it to for her being willing to do this with the family. Look, the two older girls were also a bit reluctant to come around on this trip. But when you're 14 and close to 13, you don't really have a lot of leverage in what the family does, do you? So and then the 9-year-old boy, he was just happy, I don't know, playing Lego wherever it was. He could do it in his lounge room or in the back of the car. He was just happy with wherever we were. And you remember that joke? You may have heard the joke of the man who goes out golfing every Sunday, and one day he doesn't get home until 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and his wife says, how come you were so late? He says, Jack, my regular partner, he he has a heart attack on the first hole. My wife says, oh my goodness, is that why you're late? He goes, yeah. So, for the next 18 holes, it's hit the ball, drag, jack, hit the ball, drag, jack. Uh, and so, so that joke is a reminder for the first 2 or 3 months of our trip around Australia. For the first 2 or 3 months, I felt like I was dragging the family around the country. But something happens, I think, and people who've done something similar to this will recognize this dynamic, and that is that after about 2 or 3 months, you start getting into your rhythm. And you need to give, if anyone is thinking about doing a trip like this over an extended period of time, you've got to allow yourself a few months of, frustrations and difficulties and, even wondering whether you've done the right thing. But just know that after a period of time, you find a rhythm that, that it just all starts to come together. So, look, the question was, I forgot the question, Pete. What do the kids?
Yeah, I'm just when did it switch from Dad's adventure to the family adventure, and what did you do? What could they do to support themselves through that? Because 9 months on from having it switched, it's self-sustaining, I'm guessing.
Yes. Look, it switched for each of us at different periods. There's the middle child. Child number 2, which took a lot longer to stop saying, you've taken me away from friends, to, that comment late one night around a campfire where she says, Dad, I'm really glad we're doing this. So it happens at different times, depending upon the personalities and proclivities of your kids. I'm still not sure that my wife is exactly there yet. We're coming to the end of it, and I can see a smile and a glint in Joanne's eyes that we are coming. And I've said one of our options is to keep on, to keep going. And she's really sort of, clamped down any kind of conversation of that nature. So I think, although I know, well, I hope that in over the next few months and years, Joanne will also look back at it with very fond memories, as I know she has. But I think she's looking forward to getting back to a more structured lifestyle.
What is she looking forward to the most?
Look, she's a gardener. So she likes her gardens. I think she's looking forward to a little bit of space of her own, and so she is. We do have some other projects planned for next year, and one of those, Pete, is she wants to buy a farm in New South Wales. Nearer to family, and so she's leveraging this 12-month trip now by saying, hey, you did this, David, so look, let's for the next project, why don't we do that? And she's got a bit of leverage. She's got some. I think that's a trump card. So I think she's looking forward to getting back into gardening.
So you're coming to the end of this particular adventure. What are you looking forward to, and yet what are you not looking forward to?
Look, so at the moment I am writing a book. This sounds really highbrow, doesn't it? Really, and I'm writing a book. Well, I am. I'm writing a book on the first two young guys, 21-year-olds, who were the first to drive a motor vehicle around Australia back in 1925. It's an incredible story of adventure. And they did it in a tiny second-hand Citroen 7-horsepower car that was just barely enough room for the both of them, overcoming incredible obstacles. It took them 5 months to do it. And it's a story that's never really been written down in detail. And so, why not me to write the story of this book? seeing as we've just done this, seeing as the centenary's coming up in a couple of years' time, and seeing as that these two young blokes were missionaries that belonged to my church.
Wow.
And the car is now held in the National Museum of Australia, there in Canberra, and it's a great story. So I'm going to write a book, and I've had access to a whole bunch of archives that allows me to do this. So I'm in the process over the next few months of writing this book. I do need to, and I say I do need to, head back out on the road to go to some of the places these guys went to research this book. So I'll be back over in Western Australia next year and other places. But my wife tells me I'll be there on my own. So there's a bit more travel and adventure to do this in preparation for that. And look, I am dreaming a little bit. I managed to come across about a month ago the same model car that did the 50th anniversary lap around Australia back in 1975. It hasn't been driven since. It's in perfect condition. Wouldn't it be great in a couple of years' time for the centenary to drive that same car around Australia to commemorate that event? So that's what I'm in the early stages of planning as well.
That looks like an obvious next invitation to guest and talk about that experience, sir.
Invitation, Pete. If you're in a couple of years' time, you want to jump in this tiny little 100-year-old car with me and circumnavigate the continent, Pete, I can think of far worse travel companions than you, buddy.
I think I'll take that as a compliment. You started by, your and I know you're not spruiking advice necessarily, but you had this idea that if something's in your heart that won't go away, find a way to do it. This has obviously been in your heart and you've now done it. Has it gone away?
Well, no, not. But it is something where even if family circumstances wouldn't allow me to do something like this ever again, I'll look back and with incredible fondness of the experience. But I've always had a little bit of a travel wanderlust in me. That's where you and I met over in the UK 20 odd years ago. I thought I'd go over for a year and ended up being there 10 years. Pete, you've got a similar experience too. You went from the UK to Australia back in the mid noughties, and you gave yourself 2 years, didn't you? And here you are 14 years later, still living in Australia as well. So look, folk that do have a little bit of, what do they call it? Itchy feet, wanderlust, know the experience. If they're listening in and they've got that, they know the experience, that it never quite leaves you. You may be able to put the lid on it for a little while, but every now and again it comes out, and whether that's a week's trip here or a year's trip somewhere else, rather than having a single trip of a lifetime, why not have a lifetime of trips? So,
David, boom.
Yeah. No, that's not my line, by the way, but it's a good line.
That is a great line.
Yeah, but why not? Why not? If it's in your heart, and I think that was the case for me with ministry, Pete. I tried many things before I finally succumbed to that calling. I tried to avoid it, but like the ancient story of Jonah in the Bible, where he tries to escape, the calling on his life. Finally, you've got to succumb to it and just follow it. And so that was, in our current experience, that was what it was like for me. It won't go away, Joanne. We just have to do this.
David, I'm going to pause our conversation there because I can't go past that Hollywood line of, it was more than a trip of a lifetime. It was a lifetime of trips. We finished these, David, with kind of 4 or 5 quick fire rounds. So I'm going to fire a couple of questions at you. If you'd be happy to answer with the first word that comes to mind. What's your favorite Aussie word?
Aussie word, good on you. Good on you, which is kind of like 3 words, but the way the Aussies say it, it's 1 word, isn't it? Good on you.
Spelled all 1 word.
Yeah.
What's a rule you like to break?
Yes, if the majority are doing it, then it must be wrong.
What's one thing you wish you knew the day before you left on your trip?
That's the day before I left on the trip, that it'll be all right in the end. And I think that's pretty much what you could approach this pandemic with too, can't you? You know, it'll be all right in the end. As a species, we've survived far worse. And all of those, you know, I know this meant to be a quick fire thing, Peter, but let me just throw this in for those who may be concerned about the pandemic, you know, and what all that means. It'll be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. It'll be all right in the end.
I've got to stop. I've got to stop there. You've just given us too much there. I can't ask another question now. If it's not all right, it's not the end. Oh my goodness. Sir, I am so grateful, humbled and delighted that you came on and shared a small part of what has been an extraordinary year. And don't you ever believe the story that you're not an ordinary guy doing extraordinary things. It's been a real pleasure, David. And I do look forward to us grabbing a hug and a beer together when you finally make it back down to Sydney.
I'll take the hug, but being an ordained minister of the Christian faith, I'll have to forego the beer, unfortunately, Pete. But I will give
non-alcoholic. Non-alcoholic.
Oh yeah, of course. I forgot about that. Yes, of course.
David, thank you for your time. It's been my pleasure indeed.